Welcome back to Let's Talk Agri-Tech, where we explore the role of innovation and technology in the future of farming. This mini-series is built around the insights from our latest report, Innovation and Technology, the Farmer's Perspective. And this report captures the views of farmers and what they need from agri-tech, the barriers to adoption, and how we can co-develop better solutions. Over the course of this podcast series, we'll be speaking with experts to unpack these themes in more detail. And today we're joined by Claire Hodge, who is the head of Agri-Systems at the UK Agri-Tech Centre. And we're going to discuss how we can better integrate farmers' knowledge into research and development, the role of co-development, and what it takes to bridge the gap between innovation and on-farm application.
Hey, my name's Claire and I'm the head of the Agri-Systems team at the UK Agri-Tech Centre. We work in the innovation team and really try and develop new technologies, new innovations with a whole supply chain, working with farmers, researchers, retailers, just trying to create an environment of understanding what challenges are, very much closely working with government and thinking about what those solutions could look like and what process do we need to go through to get there. So we work with a team of people and we have industry specialists going from everything from aquaculture, horticulture, which I think is a big gap in between of everything else. And really the exciting bit as well is trying to join up where the opportunities could be. So whether it's circular systems, looking at waste, looking at technologies, robotics, data, AI. So it's this big mixing pot of opportunities and challenges and then bringing people together to work on them. Really fortunate to do the job I do. Having come from a farming background, never imagined I'd get to do something like that. Worked with potato farmers all across the UK, lots, and loved the roles and responsibilities that I've been able to take on. And so lots of great stuff and continue to work with amazing people, trying to think of the future for me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Claire. We're excited to talk to you about what innovation means to farmers. So I just wanted to ask you, given your background and the job that you do now, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear innovation in farming? And how, just to follow on from that, how do you think farmers feel about innovation in general?
I think when you think about innovation from a farming point of view, it's problem solving and constant adaptation. Farming never stays still. So it's continuously looking at what resources do you have, who are you working with, where are you working, what's happening with the markets. We've got big challenges with climate change, rising costs and new regulation. So innovation is the people that pull all that together and understand it, reflect on it and kind of help develop those next stages. Everyone in farming, I think, is innovative. I think often we don't recognize the true innovators in agriculture, and mission is to pull those people out and get them on board and try and understand the future and where we go from there.
Claire, you bring up a really interesting point there, which I think came out in a different way in the research, which is that farmers are the true innovators, and they're actual natural innovators. They're natural innovators in the sense that everything they do all day is innovating to solve problems on farm and in lots of different spheres of problem solving, whether it being a mechanic, a vet, a data scientist these days. And so given that they are these natural innovators, how can we best position them to work with people from other areas to help develop technologies and other solutions to improve their farming practices and those of other farms?
I think the first step is to really listen to the farmer's position and understand how they how they operate, how they perceive the challenge, understanding the environment in which they're operating in. And the second bit is I see is a really important role that we play with innovation. It's exciting to think about the big picture robot and how do we work towards a greener future, better systems. But if the irrigation pipe's broken and the cows are out, the priority is solving those immediate tasks. So when I say take away the noise, it's try and find technology that keeps the cows in or helps them with the broken pipes. That though even though those don't seem like exciting technologies, that's so critical for farming. So we've got to take on the boring stuff as well as the exciting stuff. But then also when we get people together, it's making sure we make the most of their time and make the most of their insight. So doing lots of translation, doing lots of the groundwork, helping them prepare. So yeah, like I often say it's let them do the exciting stuff and we do the boring bits, and try and make sure that we can draw out all those, the wonderful insight and experiences. We've got generational knowledge from our farmers that we can't underestimate the value of what they know. And it's really making sure that we can communicate that with people that are new to the industry and full of enthusiasm, and how do we transfer and exchange the knowledge and insight from farmers. So yeah, we do some of the less exciting stuff so the farmers can really focus on where they want us to go forward.
It'd be nice to jump in a little bit on something you said there, which was around farmers' knowledge, and something that came out both in our research and actually the broader research that's been done in this space, particularly around farmer-led research, is this idea of farmers' tacit knowledge and how they have this huge wealth, what you refer to as generational knowledge as well, of the land and how to work with the land and with livestock, that sometimes isn't translated well across to partners they might be working with in the technology sector or academia. Do you see ways that we might be able to better help bridge those gaps?
Yeah, definitely. Like the work that we do with our farm network is really important because they help us steer which areas we work in. They help us test ideas. Um, it's about creating that framework of support and feedback as quickly as possible. So our farm network is critical in that, I'd say, and making sure that we understand not just the challenge, it's the transfer of information and having a kind of welcoming approach to everyone. So if we can take people out on farm, we do. If we can run webinars or get people online, and seeing things visually is really important, and definitely experiencing the environment is pretty critical. So we do as much of that as possible. There's always more that can be done, but definitely the farmers are at the core of being able to develop that. And also working with other farm networks across the country, making sure that we connect with other networks, really valuable networks across the UK and even globally, to share those types of insight and knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like that level of collaboration that you're talking about is something that we do really well at the UK Agri-Tech Centre, and I think you do really well in your role. And it's a key theme that came out in a lot of the research that we did, was that farmers want to collaborate and they want to work together if you take their time, commitment, and consider what they might be sacrificing to work with you. So I'd love to know from your perspective how we can bring farmers along this co-innovation, co-development journey, and what we might not be considering that we should.
I suppose the first step is making sure that we listen and hear farmers' ideas. So the Adopt program that's recently launched and we're part of, no idea is daft either. Let's contest with anything. Really, we always want to understand farmer development of ideas. Someone did ask me just a couple of weeks ago, how many of your ideas are coming from farmers? And needs to be more. We need the farmers to come up with those ideas. And it's not that they're not, it's knowing who to come to and who to speak to. So yeah, more forums, more opportunities to speak to us. And some of it's just adapting what we have as well. Like it's taking what we already have and adapting it. So even if it's very specific for an individual's business, which is often the case, the more voices we have, the more examples we can use as case studies and opportunities, the better a case we have to help the technology companies understand where the gap in the market is and what would be a true product that would be successful. And when I say true product, there's lots of ideas of things farmers want, but often that it's not a product that they want to pay for or would realistically invest in. It's really important that we get that kind of groundswell of ideas and technologies that they would to see on their farms.
So, Claire, I know that in previous roles, you've actually done a lot of work at the ideation stage, working with farmers. And, I think this is sometimes an overlooked area. Obviously, we now at the UK Agri-Tech Centre are going to be involved in the support hub for the Adopt Fund, which is all about farmer-led innovation. And again, trying to tease out this stuff ideation phase. Have you got, off the top of your head, some tips or some insights on working with farmers at kind of an ideation stage?
First of all, maybe not calling it ideation.
But I
Um,
think that I know, but I love that, and I think it's obviously a conversation we've had before, and here we are discussing it, and I've slipped into using this kind of innovation terminology, and so I think it is a really relevant point and one worth worth highlighting.
yeah, what does ideation mean, and how do yeah, when do yeah, how do we what's a good example of that? I used to use an example of like when I was younger and then thinking about previous roles, thinking about what makes a good meeting with farmers and what do I think is successful. And when I used to help on the farm at home, and you'd go away on days to learn about, you know, technologies or new ways of doing things and different ways of doing stuff. I used to always say that the thing I always wanted to achieve when I was running a meeting was it's that conversation in the car on the way home. It'd be me, my dad, the dairyman. It's that conversation that's critical. It's that conversation of what did we see and what can we do on the farm at home. So for me, when I run any meeting, that's what's in my mind. I'm like, who are you going to speak to? And what is it that you're going to talk about in the car on the way home? And then if you're talking about it on the way home, then that's when you reflect on it and think, okay, how can we do this as a team? How will it fit into our business? So that's always been what I've tried to achieve. It's like I want them to go home and not talk about if the lunch was good. I want them to talk about, can we do this? And even if it's no, we can't do it, it's got us thinking about, but could we be doing it different way? Or are we doing it the right way? And that's when I talk about ideation, I'm like, what are we talking about on the way home and in the car? What can we implement and what do we want to see more of? And so, yeah, if I could capture those conversations, life would be a lot easier. Um, but yeah, it's thinking about what are people going home with and then what can they action? And if we can understand what people can action on in their businesses, that's where we can make real roads forward in technology.
Claire, you bring up a really good point about how farmers communicate with each other and other people. And one thing that came up was who are their trusted advisors? And when we have these conversations with farmers, they do have people who they like to go to have these conversations with. So I think my next question is, more on the R&D side of the industry. How do we become more trusted advisors to farmers and how do we bring them along for the journey in a better way?
I suppose it's the network. It's all about the network. It's about understanding your supply chain. I've done a lot of work for potato companies. Understanding where the seed comes from is really critical, understanding who your customer is. And those networks and conversations are really important. So that's really critical to us to make sure that we understand what Tesco's wants as much as what's coming out of the research at the universities. How do we make farmers part of that more?
Something that you brought up there, which is really interesting and worth talking about a bit more, is the priorities of upstream in the food chain. Because a point which doesn't get made enough, I don't think, is farmers get paid proportionally a very small percentage. Most of the value of the food chain is from manufacturing up. And therefore, that's where the money is to pay for development of technology, adoption of technology, implementation, etc., etc., etc. And so making sure that technologies and the output of technology are going to answer the needs both of the farmer as the end user and of the people who are going to have the money to pay for it. Is that an area, would you be open to talking a little bit about how we might be able to make those two work together a bit more?
Yeah, producer groups are definitely key to that, like understanding which supermarket, which producer group. Lots of the supermarkets have done great. McCain's are doing brilliant programs to try and help adopt different practices, different pricing structures available. So yeah, like that's been happening for years. It's not a new concept by far. It's important to make sure that the farmers are a part of that at each step. They're part, again, we go into co-development. It's not imposed. It's something that they can buy into direction of change. I think that's where it becomes difficult. It's when practices or technology are imposed on farmers, they're very unlikely to embrace the technology. And then when I say that as well, it's not just perhaps the farmer that's using the technology, it's got to be whether it be the dairyman or the tractor driver, the person using the technology also has to be part of that chain. The chain isn't kind of two-dimensional. So yeah, there's the producer groups are brilliant, but I always encourage that should involve as many people on the farm or at the user end as possible, not just the business end. Yeah, so those are really good schemes and approaches to get technology onto farm. I don't think they're the only ways, and we've got to be careful to moving responsibility onto the retailers. It's got to involve the farmers as well, and they've got to steer where they want a lot of these things when it comes to animal health and welfare, when it comes to plant disease. It's making sure that the farmers are part of those decisions and driving the way forward. It shouldn't just be driven by consumers. So it's got to be an up and down process.
Yeah, just following on from that, most of the farmers that we spoke to, the biggest change in their farm system was technology adoption. So I think we kind of know that it's inevitable that we're going to start integrating technology more. We are seeing a real shift towards that. So I'd really like to know, as someone who sits on kind of both sides of the coin, you work on the R&D side and you have a farming background. There's always this talk about bridging that gap. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, to bridge the gap. So I always say as well that we've achieved huge amounts, and there's lots of kind of silent technology on farm. Some actually redundant, which I might talk about after this. But the first point is there's lots of technology we haven't noticed. So if you go 10 years ago or 20 years ago, there's lots of things that we didn't have in our daily lives that really help how we farm, often, we focus a lot on the efficiency, but we've got things that are about safety. We've got things that just make our days more comfortable. There's lots and lots of technology out there. That GPS, we've got robotic milking. There's an abundance of technology out there that we're using. So it's sometimes about reflecting where we've got to and acknowledging how much we've achieved. So I think there's this kind of perceived skepticism of technology, but often there's a kind of silent movement of technology just appearing on farms by default. Some of that is because of tractors have progressed hugely over a very short period of time. I suppose depending on which generation you are as well, you'll have a different perspective of how that's progressed. But a lot of that is just coming in as standard, which wasn't there before. So, you've bought a piece of technology that has equipment and capability way beyond perhaps what you'd even have spec'd it for. So, yeah, so the first bit is we've achieved a lot. And I think there's a real hunger to do more. But I think we have to be realistic too, that it's not just all about the exciting stuff, and that I actually think farmers don't see themselves as being progressive as they actually are. I think what we do is amazing and the rate of change is phenomenal. I think we often look perhaps more at the failures or the what should we be doing rather than, gosh, what have we actually done? And the kind of silent technology that's there that people don't notice, that's a big thing. I suppose on the kind of flip side of that, there's technology that's perhaps been encouraged to be on farm. People have invested in, and it's not integrated with other technologies. It's not done what it was supposed to do. It's been difficult to use. It didn't give the results that were expected. And I think people perhaps focus on those technologies more than the stuff that's actually just getting on with it in the background and making our lives a little bit easier that we didn't have, 4, 5, 10 years ago. So yeah, I think a lot of it's about perspective, but I think agriculture is really progressive and farmers really do want technology, and often they don't notice what they're using.
Interesting, Claire. And I think a number of points you raised there came up somewhat in our research, but also in others. There was a piece of work done last year that came out with a report called Agri-Ecological Intelligence, and it really dug into this idea that sometimes we, particularly in R&D, chase shiny new tech syndrome, always trying to jump forwards to the kind of the next thing and the kind of hottest thing, when in some cases there is potentially a need to sort of put on the brakes a little bit and focus on both existing technologies that need to be adopted more broadly or made more appropriate, or to focus on how technologies can be used to help adopting new practices that are emerging. And one of the reasons I'm such a fan of the new Adopt Fund, which we're involved in, is that it has a focus on those areas. Do you have some further thoughts on that, like where this balance is between us working to innovate with the cutting edge and to improve the kind of use of existing technologies and practices?
I think it's a balance of both. Like, we need to understand the cutting edge, and we need to, scout out technology from different sectors and imagine, what an alternative way of doing things could be, especially when we look at some of the huge challenges we potentially are facing in terms of probably more in the environmental side of things and sustainability, and looking at how we look after our soils, manage water, pest and disease. We have to look at that kind of transformational shiny, whether it be shiny that we can see or develop breeding programs, or looking at disease control from a chemical approach or non-chemical approach. And those technologies tend to be adopted without too many decision-making points of farmers. And then there's the other side, which is shiny pieces of machinery, their own farm. But as I say, like, a lot of it can be pretty small incremental pieces of technology that come through those transformational programs. So I do see there being a kind of flow through. It could be really basic things like looking at, if we've got a robotics project and looking at automation, some of the stuff that we have to look at there is the foundations of connectivity. It's understanding some of the software and kind of design, and understanding how these robots are automating processes using some software, which is not particularly exciting, but it's really valuable in making sure that we keep progressing. It's got to be a scale of the kind of completely not this kind of dystopian future that we don't understand, to the getting over today's challenges and understanding where, how do we keep the cows in when we want to do rotational grazing? It's all little pieces coming together, and some of it's big grand challenges and some of it's fixing water pipes. I think we've just got to keep open to farmer challenges and different positions in achieving it. So I wouldn't say one over the other. I'd say it's got to be a programmed approach. And so it's a bit of everything, making sure that we focus on working towards the future.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting how you're bringing together the different threads, Claire, how we get ideas from farmers, how we bring them along from the beginning, and then how we develop practical solutions in a gradual way with considered effort. So I think that's all really, really great. And Tom and I have massively picked your brain as part of this research process in the past, in multiple full-day workshops. And one of the things that came out when we were working together and running through the results of our research was this idea of co-development. So I'd really love to get your perspective on that. How can the industry be co-developing with farmers?
How can we work with farmers to co-develop? It's, first of all, the simple fun stuff is getting in a room together and throwing the challenges, or throwing them on the wall and seeing which ones stick. And then like reflecting back and then bringing different viewpoints in to the farmers. But it's really critical farmers are at the beginning of the process, that we don't start in the lab or start with the research. Start with the farmers, get their ideas, but make sure we check in. Really critical is making sure that we check in with the farmers, the kind of environment of farming, to check that the idea is still relevant. Because actually, we can be really indulgent sometimes in thinking, okay, we've got like a 4-year program to develop a robot. In fact, one of my favorite projects we worked on, it was great fun looking at trolleys in fruit picking, and that was really heightened because of the challenges with labor, and a lot of the workers were international workers, and we had a real shortage of people to come across, and there was huge waste in the soft fruit sector at that period of time, a critical period of time. So we were working on a 4-year project, and looking at trolleys to try and save time for pickers, and that they would use these trolleys to save time. The project had looked at lots of different ways they'd gone to the farm and understood the environment, spoken to the people that would be using the technology, and they went away and spec'd up the trolley. And the farmers had said, it's got to be really robust because we've got lots of potholes and it's a rugged environment. Make sure it's robust. And then they went away, they costed it all up, they looked at it, they made this really incredible trolley. They didn't prototype it, but they came back and they spoke to the farmers about what this trolley needed to look like, but also then what the price point would be. And they said it was going to cost this because it's got to have this kind of infrastructure. It needs to be this strength. The response from the farmers was, I'll just fill in my potholes. It's that change of challenge, and farmers can't wait for the trolley. They can't wait for a 4-year project. So it's really important that we don't just go away and design something for 5 years down the line and we don't go back and ask them what's changed. Because they find solutions faster than anyone, because they can't continue to produce the fruit or the produce and survive their businesses survive if they don't find solutions. If anyone's going to find a solution, a farmer's going to find it fastest. But it's just making sure that we work at their pace and that we go back and check to see what they're doing and seeing how they're overcoming some of their challenges. So yeah, it's the co-development, and that's why co-development is so important, because we need to make sure we're checking in with the farmers and understanding the changes that they're experiencing at a real time with them.
What I love about that, Claire, is it really goes back to a couple of the points at the start of this conversation that came out of the research. Farmers are natural innovators, and they have an incredible amount of tacit knowledge. And so in a lot of ways, and we're not the only people to have done research on this, Centre for Effective Innovation, who we worked with on the research priorities, picked up on this as well, and have done a lot of work to try and match up farmers' research needs based on the realities, their knowledge, and the fact they're innovators on the ground, and what the broader research industry should be potentially looking at. And so I think if we have those top of mind going forwards, that we're not dealing with an industry that isn't used to innovating. Like, they do this all day, every day, and they're the ones working the land and working the farming systems. And so it's, how can we then fit what we're doing in the broader research and innovation space into the problems that they've identified and the solutions in some cases that they've already identified and are potentially, as you said, already innovating solutions to.
Yeah, one of our biggest challenges is keeping up and working fast enough for the industry that we serve.
So that wraps up today's discussion on farm-led innovation and co-development. We've explored how farmers are natural innovators, the importance of integrating their knowledge into the research and development process, and how we can better collaborate to create practical and effective solutions. Our full report, Innovation and Technology, the Farmer's Perspective, dives deeper into these themes with insights from 120 farmers, case studies, and industry expertise. Download it now to explore the findings in further detail. This episode is part of our special podcast series where we've been speaking to the experts on these topics. Make sure to check the rest of the series for more in-depth discussions. If you'd like to get involved, share your experiences, or learn more about how the UK Agri-Tech Centre is supporting farmer-led innovation, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're a farmer looking to shape the future of research and technology, register for updates for the Adopt Fund via the support hub on FarmPet. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.